Hey. It is Monday night. It's another Monday night. I'm excited to be back home. Um I for anybody who's hoping for, an episode last week or live stream, I have to apologize. I was traveling for work. Couldn't do it. And even though this week in Ink had me on, and I felt like I was betraying my own show a little bit. Saying I couldn't do it, and then jumping on somebody else's. But it was a lot of fun hanging out with those guys, and it's not as much work on my end, to just dial into a show. So that was pretty good. But anyway, for those of you joining this week, thanks so much. I'm excited for this show. There's been a lot going on the last few weeks with Lorcana news and Glimmer Gauntlet and work and everything else. And the set championships the store set championships have kind of crept up on me. I know I've been talking about them for a while, but really up until this point, I haven't had a chance to like sit down and digest and realize that I'm playing in a big-ish tournament in a few weeks. And I'm a little nervous, but excited. And so I really haven't had a chance to like fully dive into the meta like I've really wanted to fully decide on what deck I want to play. And I know a lot of other people are sort of in the same boat. So yeah, I do have one like big mission this week, and that is to make sure my audio is good for this. The comments about the volume of my audio post stream have gotten to the point where I really can't ignore them anymore. So you all let me know when my guests are on if my audio is quieter from them, and I'm going to keep adjusting it to make sure that we're good. So yeah. Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it. Yeah, different show. But it was a lot of fun hanging out with those guys. So yeah. So I'm really excited for this week. We're going to have two guests on. Thanks, Trey. We're going to have two guests on, and we're going to be talking a lot about the state of the meta, what decks are good, what decks are not good. We've got a couple of products we're going to go through to kind of to look at and figure out, what the meta looks like. We're going to talk about what matchups, what decks are good against what decks, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So if you're here and you're hanging out in the chat, ask questions, all night long about the meta or the decks or, Lorcana or life in general. We love, interacting with you all. And yeah, it's going to be fun. So I also have to say, I got to shout out, somebody in the chat here, Stephen Gettle, actually took the time. It was really fun. Took the time last week or the week before to tally up all of the guests that we've had on this show, and told me that we were over 100 guest appearances. For those who are wondering, June was the 100th guest. You all may remember her from the women's live streams, and she was a solo host for a while due to technical issues. But she was the 100th, invite. But we have yet to hit 100 unique guests. And I'm really excited for that. I feel like we should plan who that's going to be and like do something special for that. But we haven't quite hit it there, but we're getting close. So thanks, Stephen, for doing that. I'm pretty excited. So tonight we're going to have a new guest on to get one step closer to that 100th overall guest. I feel like it's a pretty awesome milestone. So for those who watch the channel, you may have seen that we posted a video today with another creator, another former Magic pro and fantastic Lorcana player who's out of the Dallas area. And his name is Hal Brady, and did a fantastic video. And we're excited that he's going to be on the show this evening chatting with us about Lorcana and the meta and set championships. So, Hal, welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going. I'm excited you're here.
Yeah, me too. I look a little red. I'm not under the weather. I just was at NASCAR at the Texas Motor Speedway on Sunday. It is the funnest sporting event I go to. I go like once a year with my aunt and uncle. They're like fanatics, so it's always fun to go to like a big thing with other people. That's their whole thing. That they love going to NASCAR. But I did not wear enough sunscreen, so I'm I'm a little burnt. But it was a great time.
That's so fun. I have to admit, like I've never like racing, like NASCAR, Formula One. I've never gotten into it, but I've heard from everybody who's been to a race or just explored it all that once you go to an event, like you're hooked. Like it's amazing. And
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet, but gosh, I don't know. I feel like it's a dangerous road for me to go down. I haven't.
It's funny, right? Because it's just like if you've never been to a live like NASCAR event, it's like you just see it on TV, you kind of flip past, you're like, oh, I don't, they're turning left a bunch, nothing's really going on. And then yeah, we went to our first one like 3 years ago, and the first time the cars like fire up and like go by you in the stands, you're just like, okay, all right, I'm in. So
There
it's just like 3 hours straight of that.
a lot of left turns. That's yeah, that's right. I do want to go. So I'm excited. Maybe one day Ravensburger can sponsor a team. And we can have an Illuminary car, and then I can have the best of both worlds.
I mean, they
God,
just make like a Lightning
is it
McQueen sponsorship, right? I
there?
mean,
Why hasn't that been done? That would be fantastic.
yeah.
Oh my goodness, the possibilities. Oh man, we came up with it here first. All right. And we have one more guest this evening, joining us again. He's been here before. You know him, you love him. It's Knive from Knives Nerd Corner.
Hello.
Hey, Knive. And Marble is making an appearance there.
Oh,
Um,
always.
yeah. So Knive, welcome back.
Well, it's good to be back.
For those who don't know, Knive creates content under the channel Knives Nerd Corner. It's a lot of limited, but you've gotten really into like maths, as the British would say recently.
Yes.
Yeah, mathing things for Lorcana, which is pretty exciting.
hmm Yeah, I have a degree in it, and so I guess I'm developing my campaign to become the Frank Karsten of Lorcana, I guess.
Well, keep it up. So one of the reasons I'm excited to hear is we're going to look at a product tonight, kind of a graph that I believe you and Franz from Traverse Tavern developed together. So it kind of shows matchups and what decks are good against what. And I'm excited you're here to kind of talk us through kind of the idea behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To be honest, it was mostly Franz, but yeah, I'd
Yeah,
be happy to talk about it in his stead.
that's what he said too. But you did enough, at least for some of the idea
Mhm.
that he wanted to make sure you were cool with having it on. Like, so you were the impetus for the project. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I basically asked him to create this chart thing for another project that I'm working on.
Yeah, we're talking about it. Let's show
Yeah,
everybody
we're
what it looks
talking
like.
about it. Let's show
We're,
it. Yeah.
we're gonna look at this a lot more in a bit. I do want to show another kind of product first, but this is what we're referencing. I haven't interrogated this much myself, but what this was an attempt to do is look at statistics, look at different matchups, and well, actually, Nav, why don't you explain it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking over your product here.
No, it's all good. So, what this is like phase 0.5 of just a general idea of how each color pair or like the primary deck that you think of from each of these color pairs, how they match up against each other. So, for example, on the second row, you have Ruby Amethyst. That is your traditional Ruby Amethyst balance control deck. And you see that it has a green F when it is connected to Ruby Sapphire. The reason that's there is because Franz and I have kind of determined that Ruby Amethyst is favorable against the Ruby Sapphire deck for a couple reasons. Obviously, there are
I was
some
gonna
weak
want to jump
points,
in here, but keep
but
going.
yeah. These numbers on the top, we've actually kind of already gotten rid of. We've learned that, except in very extreme cases, um, there really isn't any decks that are favored more than 55%. Um, Mostly just because of there's skill involved all the time, and you could have a deck that favors the opponent's deck and still lose to it. So it's just kind of a way to kind of conceptualize what you should be playing against or what you should be playing with if you know what you're playing against.
Yeah, interesting. We'll dive in a bit more to that later. I thought we'd just
Yeah.
throw it up. But I think it's an interesting idea. The one thing I want to say is before I jump over to this article, I I'm interested in your all thoughts on this too. Like, you know, as we look at set championships, I know a lot of people, myself included, are kind of wrestling with, you know, what they should play. I think it's, you know, much better to settle on a deck early, whatever it is, like pick a deck and settle on it early in practice and know that deck, and know kind of what else is out there, practicing different opponents rather than trying to find the perfect deck, right? Like better to play an okay deck super well than like the best deck poorly. What do you all think?
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. Especially with like this game being like so new, it's hard to be. I think a level of expertise, and in like other games, you've been playing it for like a decade. You can kind of just like look at the decks, know how to play all of them, and be like, okay, let me like create this whole new strategy that I think that's going to beat like most of the decks that I think I'm going to play. I'm not going to lie, I tried to do it for the store championships. I did come up with an entirely new archetype. I'll have a video out on that like in a week or so, but it was not
My
quite
goodness.
good enough. I'm not quite confident in it. I did go like 5-0 at one weeklies and then 4-1 at the next one. And just like how close the games were, how long it took to win the games, I was like, I'm not going to put these like Rockstar stitches on the line for it. But long story short, it was a red-green action-based deck that played like Singer Ursula and a bunch of discard and do it again with Be Prepared so you could recur Be Prepareds and Airfoil. You basically could draw your entire deck, banish everything your opponent had in play, and make them discard their entire hand. It's everything that embodies what I liked doing in other TCGs, and I put a lot of time into it. It's just I'm not quite confident enough. So anyway, I tried. So all in all, long story short, yeah, just play a good no deck.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture here. So if you are like a super casual player, like you don't have any of the meta decks and you don't want to invest into any of the meta decks, play the deck that you know. Play the deck that you know you're good at. Play the deck that you like to play with. If you are a casual player, this is probably your first experience in a competitive setting. So I would say like I don't want to say like manage your expectations, but in a way like understand like less than half the people that step foot into that store is going to leave with a stitch. So don't so whenever you're playing, just like under like I guess the best way to put it is like play the deck that you know. Like if you play the deck you know, you're going to play better than playing a deck that you don't know. Um, and just it's a combination of having fun and playing your best. Ultimately,
Yeah, I do like that. Having fun is the most important, but the stitches are also
oh,
important.
winning the stitches is going to be really fun.
I don't know. So let's dive in a little bit to kind of the meta right now. And I want to do it. You know, one of the things I really love doing, you know, on this show or on this channel is connecting people with different resources and creators and stuff out there. And I really like this article that Eric Switzer wrote of the Gamer a few days ago. Yeah, published 2 days ago. But in it, what he's trying to do is, you know, he talks about, you know, the set championship, and you know, the hardest part is choosing the right deck, which I think is, I don't know, mentally, I think that's kind of the hardest part for me right now. So, but he goes through the various decks that are prevalent right now, and the different color combos. And I thought it would be a good way to kind of go through the list of what's prominent, and kind of talk about it. I will say one thing, and I know, and I do it too. Like we get hung up about the meta a lot, and we look at like big tournament results and the results out of France and things like that. These big tournaments. But you know, I think both of you said something that kind of hinted at this. Like, what matters most is like what your local meta is like.
Mhm.
You know, what are people playing at your store? What you know, and the local meta oftentimes can't, unless you're in Dallas with all these pro players like Hal and Bobby Break and stuff. The meta oftentimes, like the local meta, can't shift as fast as it can, you know, on like the pro tour or whatever. So, you know, people build their decks, and sometimes that's what they're going to play, you know, for the season. And so even as things change week to week, you know, oftentimes, you know, your store is going to have a very particular meta, and that's going to be kind of static. So I think as we talk about meta, just keep in mind that what is going on locally, like wherever you're playing your set championship, is what you need to think about. But I don't know.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. DFW area is going to be brutal for these set championships, but luckily there are 7 like different ones over this week course that people can sign up for, and a lot of them conflict. So I'm actually pretty excited because I kind of procrastinated a little bit. A lot of the ones that were first announced were already full, but then some of the ones that are like on those same days are still filling up. And I already know that a lot of the scarier competition locked in the early ones, so I may actually end up getting to dodge a lot of the really other like hardcore players. But yeah, I mean, definitely play a deck you already know. If you're somebody like me that looks at deck lists all day, every day online, and you come across like, it's like I've been playing red blue. I look at red blue decks all the time, or ruby sapphire items, and then I see a list of like some cards that aren't in my list. I may try it out, but if I can't figure out why that player had that card in them and I don't know them and can't ask, I'm not going to put it in mine because I'm not going to know what to do with it. So like, don't take some random card choices that you don't understand the game plan for. Put something in there that you have a game plan for or know what you're going to use it for.
Exactly. I was actually a good example was until today I was committed to the Amethyst Emerald deck for set championships. Then going through it, I realized I don't have the ability to play Yzma correctly yet. And so what I'm doing is I'm kind of shifting over because I know that I don't know, And so knowing your deck is very important. And so that is why I'm probably going to move over to my baby, which is Steel Song.
Steel Song.
Hey, it's been my baby since Gen Con.
I know, you and Bivens running around with Steel Song. All right. But it is the one you know. All right, so first up, looking at Eric's article here, the first one he highlights is could it be any other deck than Ruby Amethyst? I mean, this deck's been around since set 1. It's very different now, though, since the first chapter. So where do we see this, in the meta right now, in terms of its popularity, and then how do its matchups look? What do y'all think?
This deck runs rampant in DFW. Like, people love Ruby Amethyst. It was obviously everywhere in Chapter 2. It didn't cost them much to upgrade it in Chapter 3, so a lot of people just stuck with it. If you're a newer player wanting to play in one of these store championships and you've just kind of been building on one, a pre-con or just like messing around with your own ideas, but you're like, you know what? I want to take a serious deck to this and really try to win a stitch. I would not recommend any other deck but this. Obviously, there's other good choices if like you're a tournament player already, but this deck is just every individual card in this deck is so powerful that even if you don't play it correctly, you can still just stumble into wins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this deck is like, if you are comparing it to like a car race, this is the car that is a steady, fast pace. It's not going to do big spurts or anything like that, but it will have a consistent pace. If you know your lines even decently, you're going to be able to consistently play it well. It's still everywhere. It consisted 24% of the 10K that Tia hosted this past weekend on the charity event. So it's it's still popular. It's still here. The biggest weakness about this deck is that it can't answer to Lucky Dime. That's really the only like glaring weakness of this deck.
Is that what you say? How I know Lucky Dime is like your thing.
No, I mean, I totally agree. I don't know if it was a right choice or wrong choice. In my Ruby Sapphire deck, I'd play 3 dimes because as soon as you get one to play against Ruby Amethyst, the faster the game ends. And it really can come down to, like, if it goes down to like an attrition war, like they can draw more cards than you easily. And if you don't get Lucky Dime, they're just going to outcard you. I mean, you almost have to have Lucky Dime to ensure you can beat this deck. So, yeah, I mean, I agree. It's funny. The Ruby Amethyst players in my neighborhood are like, why don't we get something to interact with items? I'm like, okay, all right, well, you got to dominate the entirety of Chapter 2. Let's calm down and let some other people have some toys, okay?
Yeah. I do. Sorry, I actually want to address this question because I think it's an interesting or a good one. It's a phrase that we hear a lot in these videos, knowing your lines or lines of play. And so I'm going to take a stab at answering it, and then I'm interested to hear, what you all say. But when somebody says, lines refers to lines of play, And really, I think what that refers to is a sequence of events. Think about a sequence of plays or a sequence of events. And so it's knowing that, maybe an example would be like your first 3 turns. There's a number of, depending on your matchup, a number of actions you can take turns 1, 2, and 3 that are ideal. And they may be different in different scenarios. So maybe in one game, it's getting a 1-drop with a Ruby Amethyst here, so that on turn 2, you can play Teeth and Ambitions to target whatever aggro character they drop on, turn 1. And then turn 3, perhaps you're bouncing, that damaged 1-drop back to your hand with a Fox or something else. So it's a sequence of plays, and in any given scenario, knowing your lines means kind of what you're doing in the next couple turns or your next couple actions or stringing actions together. I don't know. How would you all describe it?
No, that's pretty much spot on. Especially in this game, where compared to like other TCGs, you like just for Magic, for example, you have lands as like a resource. You can't cast lands; they're always going to be a land. In this game, every card in your hand can, well, whether it's inkable or not, but let's just say every card in your hand's inkable. You could potentially be played or inked, and depending on what matchup you're playing against, you're going to make those decisions based on that. So just looking at this Ruby Amethyst list, if you're playing against an aggressive deck, then you want to play like turn 1 Rafiki or turn 2 or turn 1, mini, the 1/3. And then on turn 2, you probably want to snake or something to start getting your like defenses down. But if you're playing the mirror, you don't want to do that. You want to play like a 1/3 on 1 and then like Cusco on 2 to go wide and like start luring faster and try to like win the race. So yeah, I mean, definitely knowing your lines, and it's knowing your lines is also, especially in this game, is know your matchups. Like as soon as your opponent inks 1 or 2 cards, you should know what strategy they're on already and know what your game plan is with your deck against that deck.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's exactly right. So another example from this deck right here, locations right now are something that can give, a lot of decks problems, including Ruby Amethyst. But a line of play in this deck is, so looking at ways to get rush damage out, like high rush damage, is important. And so in this deck, there are a few lines of play. One of them, against, let's say, a Queen's Castle with 7 willpower is, if you have 7 ink out, you play the crab, use it to give something challenger, and then you bounce the crab with the fox, giving the fox +3 after the crab leaves play, and now you have 7, challenger damage, 7 total strength rather, to take out the Queen's Castle. Also remembering Maui's Fishhook to buff Maui when he comes out, can take out a McDuck Manor in one shot. So remembering those combinations are, I think, other examples of lines of play I would highlight in this deck that are really important, because based on your matchup, if you know a Queen's Castle is coming down or a McDuck Manor, they're cards you have to remember kind of not to ink to make sure those lines are available to you later on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a lot. Anyway, I hope that answers your question, Trey. Thanks for the question. Anyway, let's move on. This deck is gosh. I will say I feel better playing it now that I kind of know it than I did in the first chapter. It was just oppressive, but I feel like there are answers for it now. So I don't know, makes me feel a little better.
Mm-hmm.
But let's move down Eric's article. Let's go. I mean, gosh, this is Hal's baby.
Oh man.
Ruby Sapphire. This deck is, I don't know. What I love about this deck is I think we saw, Hal, you mentioned before this kind of deck tried to make a breakthrough earlier on. I don't know if I really saw it like ever really get close to breaking through in sets 1 and 2. Like it, and then, all of a sudden it did. And all of a sudden it's everywhere. What are your thoughts on this, Hal, for those that didn't watch the amazing video that we created earlier today?
Definitely got to check that out at some point. But in chapter 2, basically my playtest groups, we figured out this deck beat everything but red purple. But I mean, all there was red purple. So yeah. I mean, it didn't really. It was good. It beat all the steel decks hands down. It literally just beat everything except Ruby Amethyst. We didn't have dimes. You didn't have that like final push to get through. But now we do have Lucky Dime. And it's funny. People didn't figure that card out until a little bit later. It was kind of a meme at first. And then like the first game I had it in play and activated on like a Tambatoa or something, I was like, oh, okay, well now we can beat Ruby Amethyst, because Ruby Amethyst answers all of your cards like 1-for-1 with Be Prepared or something. But if you can gain lore immediately and not give them the opportunity to banish it before you get the value, there's nothing they can do about it.
Yeah. I don't know. I've been messing around with this a lot. And I actually really enjoy. I generally don't like playing control decks. I like going more aggro or mid range tempo. But I actually have been enjoying this one quite a bit. And it does feel good against most everything. At least I feel in the game against most everything. But the one deck that gives me trouble, and I'm gonna refer to Knives' chart here, Knive and Fran's chart. The one deck that gives me trouble with this one is Steel Emerald. Like the discard just hits me hard, and I still haven't figured that out. But I don't know. What do you all think about carrying this deck into a set championship this weekend or a couple weeks?
If you've been playing it, you feel experienced with it, I don't think it's a bad idea. I've been playing this deck for a long time, and I'm not going to play it at the store championships personally because I know a lot of local people that are going to be on it. I don't want to coin flip in the mirror match. Like just because I play 3 dimes and they play 2 doesn't really make that big of a difference. I don't really know how it's to get an edge in the mirror. So I don't feel confident winning at that point with it. I will say against the discard decks, I found a couple lines of play against them that are pretty funny. I would find myself playing Flavor Sham and not banishing an item to draw a card. Let them like completely dump my hand, and then because they don't have a lot of good ways to just banish the Flavor Sham, right? So then once I've discarded my entire hand and they're done getting value with their Prince Johns and whatnot, then I'll quest with it. I'll draw 2 cards from a popsicle and just play both of those cards immediately. So just finding like random nuances like that can help you in matchups, but that comes with playing the same deck for a very long time. That's not just like an obvious play.
Yeah, the thing I've kind of learned the same line of like if you're playing against the discard deck, let them empty your hand. And then once they're done emptying your hand and they're done with their value, that's when you can go off. With this deck, I think this deck is going to see a lot of play in the set championships because it was heavily represented in the big tournaments this past weekend. And a lot of people like playing the decks that are on the rise. And this is currently the deck on the rise. It represented 1/4 of the top 16 in Tia's tournament last weekend. I think it's a good choice. Like Hal said, if you know it, play it. Yeah, I like it.
It is as the decks go though, it is one of the pricier ones, isn't it? I mean,
It is.
With the Maleficent. I mean, the dimes have even crept up to like between $7 and $10 last I checked, and Bell is expensive. And then Hal, you run Hades, which I know is a few bucks as well. I think last I checked, I think your list was coming in at like between $450 and $500. So
yeah, it's got a lot of those chapter 1 legendaries in there. You could definitely play the deck without Bell. That was just like a personal liking for me because I mean I'm playing 3 dimes. I want bells. I want the explosive like lore gain. Hades. I honestly don't know if I would still play Hades personally. We had that in our list specifically for the Mufasa matchup, and Mufasa's kind of down on popularity, especially locally. So I mean I would still play like 2 to 3 Let It Goes. But honestly I'd probably move to the 2 and 2 split of Lady Tremaine and Madame Medusa anyway. So that would cut down a bit on the cost, but you have to play Dragon. That's like one of the big draws is like why this deck's so powerful is you get to play Maleficent Dragon and you put it up very easily, very consistently. And I wouldn't cut any of those.
Yeah. I don't know. It is a fun deck when you get to the end game though. I really do love it. Yeah, I don't know. I think you're right, Nive. I think we probably will see a lot of these. I think that's it's kind of the deck that's all the rage right now, and it's showing good results. So if it's if you're playing in a set championship, if you're not playing this deck, it's definitely one that I would familiarize yourself with, even if you can't play against it. Learn some of the lines, learn what it's trying to do, and some of the variations, so that you can kind of recognize how to play it. The one thing I will say too, save your item removal. Hal, you mentioned this. Save your item removal for that lucky dime. Hold it. There's going to be tempting targets. There's going to be fishbone quills and things. And in general, hold on to that Benja or that Judy Hopps and wait for their lucky dime, because it doesn't feel good having that banished.
No, 100%. That's the one they really don't want banished. It's funny, like everybody has the item hate is at an all-time high, and keep that in mind when you're deciding what deck to play this weekend too. If you're considering like a Steel Song deck or something, be aware if you're playing a flute version, lantern version, there is a lot of item disruption right now. But it's funny, against the Ruby Sapphire deck, you don't really care, except in the late game on your dime if you're really expecting to close the game with that. If I put Fishbone into play on turn 3 and I activate it once, I'm already on turn 4 Maui, turn 6 Be Prepared range. I don't care if you blow it up. It's whatever.
Yeah. Especially with the Judy, getting that card is even nice. It's like, thanks. Thanks for that. Yeah, anyway, fun deck. And you'll probably see it this weekend. Gosh, oh goodness gracious. Let's talk about this one. Ugh.
My baby.
Yeah, I just, Steel Song's been around since the first chapter. It got, I think better in set 2, and now it's just brutal.
And it's versatile. You can like Steel Song, I think, is way too broad of a term not for it now. Like you got Lantern Steel Song, you got Flute Steel Song, you got Pride Lands combo Steel Song.
That's a good point. And this particular list, so that's a fantastic point. And I think that applies to a lot of the decks now. There's variations, but I do think you're right, Nive, that Steel Song is probably the one that has the most variety. Because whether or not you're playing the flutes or not drastically changes how you're going to approach the game. And so that's important to know. That's a good point. Yeah. So this particular list is the Pride Lands variation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's funny they all three play completely differently too. Like you can take like baseline, they're trying to Whole New World, right? They're trying to value Whole New World, but all three play drastically different. Like the Lantern version goes bigger, like Surfer Stitches. I saw a list that played like the new like 7-drop Steel Simba.
Oh yeah,
I love that card. It's like comes into play. It's got like a million abilities, and it like deals damage, or you can draw and discard to or whatever. It's got a paragraph of abilities.
Yeah, it's when it ETBs or banishes in a challenge on your turn, you can either draw 2, discard 2, or deal 2.
Wow.
Yeah, and then the like flute version is like maxes out on songs, plays a lot of cheap characters. It's trying to Whole New World as many times as possible, control the board, win with flutes. But if I was a Steel Song player and I had to choose between the three for this weekend or this coming week, I would play the Pride Lands version because, like I said before, binges, people are playing Beast hard-headed to break items. I like this version with no items, and Pride Lands is actually pretty solid. It's helps against steel matchups too. You don't have to combo off with it. You can just move some characters there and buff their willpower by 2 is pretty backbreaking a lot of the times, especially with 4 Rapunzels. Like you can max out those Rapunzel triggers.
Oh yeah. And like this list here, it doesn't even have that like Stitch Rockstar everything.
Yeah.
Which like even shows even more how versatile these decks are, because now we're like, okay, Pride Lands, which one? The whole aggro go wide, or the just my cards are a little bit more resilient?
Yeah.
Wait, so this version actually, I follow Zansaid's his list and progress with this deck, and he originally had 4 of the 1-drop Steel Simbas because they're a prince or king or whatever you need to turn Pride Lands on. Does this list just have no way to actually turn on the Pride Lands like main ability? Is it just?
Yeah, I don't see any.
So it just gains.
Benja.
But
Benja is a king.
Benja does. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I like that. I'm not a huge fan of the 1-drop Simba, honestly.
Yeah, you have to get rid of. I mean, if you rotate it out of 1-drop, you'd have to get rid of some shift targets because you're running all the shifters here, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's true. I think if you, you only have one of the Cinderella. I don't know. But yeah, I don't know what it is about this deck. This is the one deck where, when I run into it, it just gives me fits no matter what I'm playing. I don't know what it is. Drives me crazy. It's a good deck.
I love turn 2 Whole New World.
Oh. That's the worst. It's the worst. And because, I mean, you Steel Song players all know this. Like, you're giving me 7 new cards, but you've mulliganed into like your first 4 turns, and when they dump your hand into like garbage, it's the worst feeling.
Hey, it's perfectly fair. Neither of us alters anything anymore.
Right? But you've gotten your first 2, especially when you're on the play, you've gotten your first 2 turns and you've shifted into something, and then you're dumping all of my stuff, and now I'm like, I hate it.
Yep.
I hate it with a passion. Anyway, this is yeah, I don't know. So we've talked about this deck. It's just a good list, right? What are its actually, that's a good question. What are its bad matchups? If you were considering playing this for set championships, what if your meta shaped up a particular way, why might you avoid it?
I would not choose it if you are in a Ruby Amethyst primary meta, or a Sapphire Steel primarily meta. Sapphire Steel is happy with you wheeling for them most of the time, and then Ruby. What makes Ruby Amethyst so strong about it is that if you can take out the shift targets early, sometimes Steel Song's caught spinning its wheels and not really doing anything. And that's kind of where Ruby Amethyst gets its strength against Steel Song. So if you're playing in a locals that has a lot of Sapphire Steel or Ruby Amethyst, then I wouldn't suggest it. And now saying that aloud, where I know that my meta is usually Ruby Amethyst and Steel Sapphire, I'm now reconsidering again what I'm playing this weekend.
I also don't think the Ruby Sapphire matchup is great for this deck too. But I'll say this about Steel Song: it's what I feel like I beat this deck with just literally anything I play against most players. But there are specific people that play nothing but Steel Song, and I can't beat them if they play with their eyes closed. Like they just always like find these crazy lines, and I think this deck is like a super like all in. If this is your deck and you play it all the time, just keep doing it. I mean, I don't, I would not recommend just randomly picking this up if you haven't. But yeah, it's such a weird polarizing deck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, and it's gonna be great forever. Gosh, the singers, right? Like anytime you're playing cards for free, like from your hand, anytime you set up a turn where you like have 2 or 3, high cost cards or singers on the board, and you know that you can outvalue your opponent like by that much, it's just so good. I don't know. And even when cards like Bare Necessities and Ursula Deceiver came out, I think people were like, songs, there's an answer. And it hit some of those like key decks hard, like the ones that relied on Be Prepared. But like Steel Song, didn't even phase them, I don't think. They're like, fine.
Mm-hmm.
You dumped a whole new world. I'm just going to do 18 other things and then find another one later.
I'm actually happy if you look at my handful of songs and you choose Whole New World.
That's fair. And I think that's a common play too, because I think people are so scared of it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They think that's like your main card or whatever, and so they dump it. And
I mean, it's a good card. It's a really good card. That's why it's a 4 of in every deck that it's in. But it is unlike Sapphire Steel, or at least the way I play Sapphire Steel, it is not the primary goal. So I have actually been playing this deck this season.
Good segue.
Excellent segue. This deck is fun. I really like it. It has several lines that I absolutely love. It has a couple altering decisions that are really cool. Yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with it. I might actually just stick to it for the weekend.
I don't know what. So why is this deck so? This is the 2 decks that I hate running into this season are Steel Song and then this deck right here. I don't know why this one gives me fits too. Maybe it's just Steel. I don't know.
Yep, Steel. I mean, Steel's annoying. Steel is the most played ink right now, across all levels of play. Simply because it has the arguably best removal. I mean, Ruby, I would say Ruby has the best removal, but Steel has really good removal on top of its other effects, such as a Whole New World. One of my favorite things to do with this deck is to just ramp out, empty my hand, play a turn 4 Cogsworth, turn 5 Sing, and start just Haymaker after Haymaker. And that's what this deck does, and it's really good.
Gosh. So what are its bad matchups?
It's bad matchups.
You're about to say
Brain please
nothing.
function. Ruby Sapphire. Ruby Sapphire is the weak point. Big time. Also, some aggro decks could kind of get underneath it pretty easily, depending on how you play it up. The aggro line for this deck is dramatically different than pretty much any other style, any other deck, and that can trip up some players. It trips up me sometimes because I'm focusing on my primary usual script, my usual line. And then when I realize it's aggro, it's kind of like, oh, pivot.
What do you think about this deck, Hal? Have you messed around with it much?
Yeah, this was my choice for the going into the store champs week about a week ago. And then I played against one too many Ruby Sapphire people that I know are going to stick with that deck going into this week. And I am not anywhere near confident to beat through the Ruby Sapphire matchup. I think you can with enough Lucky Dimes and McDuck Manor and that sort of thing. But I'm not at that level with Blue Steel. I don't feel confident enough. But I do think Blue Steel is pretty favored against pretty much everything else. I know the Ruby Amethyst matchup is not easy, but I do think you're favored. And it is funny. I think you are heavily favored against aggro, but you would need to know that to base your mulligan decision off of that, because
exactly,
like the deck's kind of shifted now with like these dimes and McDuck Manors and stuff, and like you have this like other game plan other than just deal a bunch of damage and like quest with Tinkerbells. So yeah, you can definitely have like kind of a combo-y like ramp start, and aggro would just run you over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fun. That's an interesting point. Somebody in the chat pointing it out that speaking of aggro, the Emerald Steel like discard aggro, can mess you up a little bit. I don't know. I do like the line you all talked about though, just like let him mess up your hand, and then quest with your
Flaversham's, and then you put down your Gastons, then you put down your whatever's.
I would say prioritize like against discard again, like prioritize inking too. Like I said, dump your hand, get as much ink in play as you can, so that you can have a haymaker top deck that you can actually play. And because they actually have the discard decks have trouble dealing with like 5, 6, 7, 8 drops. It's their hope is just to never let you get to that point. But if you just like don't play anything on turn 4, 5, and 6, and just all right, ink, fishbone, then here's a Tamatoa, then they're just like, oh, well, yeah, I can't answer that. So,
yeah. And a lot of times with this deck, I end up hard casting Whole New World sometimes, just because I have 12 ink on turn 7 or whatever, and so I can play a Whole New World and play anything that comes in my hand.
Yeah,
that's a big difference between this Whole New World deck and like Steel Songs. Like, anytime a Steel Song player hardcasts Whole New World, I'm like, oh, I just won the game. Like,
yeah,
this game's over.
Exactly.
When Steel does it, I'm just like, oh, okay, well.
Here comes all the big stuff.
Yeah.
Into Cogsworth and everything else. All right. Speaking of Steel, Emerald Steel, let's take a look at Spessie's deck here. This is I know these builds shift around, but this is what we were talking about. It's an aggro deck. It's not like a discard deck. Well, it is kind of a discard deck, isn't it? It's like discard aggro.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. There were some great decks that existed last meta, like in set 2, which were not like discard pure, but they were aggro and just put a little bit of hand pressure on, and they did really well, I think, against Ruby Amethyst, and that's why they were so good. But then with this set, it just leans a lot more into discard with Friar Tuck and some other cards. So I don't know. I also hate playing against this deck. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, what decks do you enjoy playing?
I was gonna ask that question.
So, maybe it's just Steel that I hate.
Okay.
I'll play against the Mirror, I'll play against Sapphire Ruby. I love Ruby Amethyst. I'll play against that deck all day. Like, I know exactly what it's doing now, and I'm like, all right, I can lean into this. Tempo decks, I'm good. So yeah, I guess it's like the top 3 decks I hate. I don't know.
I have some words about this deck. So this was one of the decks that my team was on for the team event in Austin a few weeks ago. and we knew we were going to play Ruby Sapphire. We knew we were going to play Green Steel. Well, no, sorry. We knew we were going to play. We had like a hyper aggressive yellow purple aggro deck that one of our teammates was like, "I'm playing this. You can't convince me otherwise. I beat anything that's non-steel," and he was right. So that was a good decision. I would never play that in a real tournament, but for a team event, when you have 2 out of 3 shot to not play against steel, anyway, we'll talk about team events another day. But the green steel list, this one specifically, the Speci list, I sent this to my team because they were like trying to just work on a typical Bucky list. But I sent them this. I was like, "Hey, I'm doing really well with this list in testing." And they looked at it, and I think they were almost like kicked me off the team. They're like, "What is Friar Tuck? What is this Robin Hood? This like green Robin Hood doing? But boom, that card playable?" And this was again like 3 weeks to a month ago. So obviously this deck has proven itself a lot in the last month. But I was like, just all right, before you do anything drastic, play some games with it, get back to me. And they called me back like 2 hours later. They're like, all right, you were right. This was definitely by far the hardest deck to play on our team. Not that our third player was the worst, but we still put this deck in the middle so that we could all 3 play this deck together. And know your lines applies probably more to this deck than any other deck I've played in Lorcana so far. Because just like you were saying, Liam, you're like, "Oh, it's an aggro. Oh, no, it's a discard. Well, it's kind of a mid-range deck." Yeah, it's all of those. It is all mulligan based. If you know you're playing against specific matchup, especially if you're just like in the dark game 1, you want Merfolk on 1, Flynn on 2, and Prince John on 3. And then we played against aggro several times with this deck. You mulligan all of those cards against aggro. You never want that start. You want Captain Hook into Shmi, into Singer Ursula with Baboom and all the removal. And this deck can switch gears like no other that I've seen before.
Yeah, I figured that out. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a good deck. And yeah, I have nothing else to say. You said it all perfectly.
Yep.
It's a good deck. I bet we'll see a bunch running around. It is interesting, we've been kind of the theme of this is getting ready for Store Championship. So I think, kind of like you said, Hal, if you haven't been playing this deck up until now, and you want to run it, you better start, or just kind of avoid it because it is, I don't know, you do have to play it just right.
Yeah, I will say in this game too, like if you play a lot of Lorcana and you have, you've got a pretty big collection. If you've played a lot of different decks and you just know how they work and how to beat those decks, like I know how to beat Ruby Sapphire. I've been playing it for like a month. I'm not going to play it anymore, but I don't really need to test against it because I know how to beat it. I know what its weaknesses are. So it's like, it's easier to switch decks if you've had a lot of time on multiple decks. So I would say that.
Yeah. All right, we got 3 more to talk about, and we're running close on time, so we're gonna have to go quicker. It's my fault. So this is my favorite, I think, deck ever since set 1. I've loved. I call it Mardi Gras because that's what it looks like to me. But the tempo, the bounce deck. This is my favorite. I'm glad to see a resurgence here in set 3 because it kind of disappeared for a bit in set 2. And I just love playing this deck. I think if you pilot this deck well, you can do decent against most matchups. I feel like steel is still, a challenge, and unfortunately steel is super prevalent right now. But I feel like if you know your lines and you play this deck well, you can beat almost anything out there, which is fun. I think, Yzma replacing the genies as kind of like your 6-drop, I think made this deck really, made this deck a little bit better. Because Genie being uninkable is a rock in your hand half the time. And there's so many good ETBs at the end game now, that one of the last things you want to do is bounce like a Tamatoa and then allow them to play it again. Or, Maleficent or any of the removal, characters in Ruby. So Yzma, I think, is just a little bit better. And, in a pinch, she can draw you some cards. So I don't know. I just love this deck.
See, that's interesting because I see Yzma the other way around, where most of the time you want to target like your rabbit and draw 3 cards.
Yeah.
Or target your goat or whoever. But like as I established earlier on, I'm still trying to figure out how to work Yzma. So I'm probably not the best person to talk to about that. I've been really brainstorming with Franz on this deck. I think this is a dark horse for like a lot of people because like not many people I don't know many people that are talking about it, except for a lot of people, I guess. Like, a lot of people are talking it behind curtains, like, oh yeah, I'm gonna bring this, but aren't projecting it, you know? And
Yeah.
so, like, I think this is a deck to keep an eye out for in your set championships. I think it's going to be one. It hasn't really exploded on like the competitive scene. Like, it hasn't, as far as I'm aware, it hasn't won anything. I could be wrong.
It's been a lot of there. I think it topped an event. Did it top that France event? I have to double check that now.
I think it won France and it did not lose a match.
Oh well.
Somebody in the chat who's feeling enterprising, look that up and drop us a comment. Yeah, I think that's but that, to your point, Nav, I think that's the first one where I really saw it, like where I saw it top, but that was a big event, right?
Yeah. Sorry, I completely forgot France existed.
No, that's all right.
I'll say a couple things about this deck. The thing about Yzma, I will say that it's probably the most situational card in the deck. Targeting your rabbit to draw 3 cards is usually a great choice. I have never seen a situation where someone Yzma'd one of their opposing characters and that be a bad play. Like, yeah, your opponent gets to draw 2 cards, but what if you hit like an 8 drop? Okay, draw 2 cards. Who cares? And this deck's all about tempo anyway. But I will say my local metagame is, from what I can see, is going to be a lot of Ruby Sapphire. It's going to be a lot of, decent amount of Steel Song, and it's going to be a ton of Ruby Amethyst. If my local meta keeps that up, everybody in DFW, just can you get away from the channel for like 5 seconds? If the local meta stays like that, I am 1,000% going to play this deck.
This deck is great against Ruby Sapphire. It's pretty good against the Ruby Amethyst. It does okay against Steel Song. I would say Steel Song's favored, but if Steel Song's the 3rd most popular deck, and Ruby Sapphire and Ruby Amethyst are the other 2 in there, I'd say go for this.
Yeah, that's my thought too. I basically any game that I have 2-cost Ursula in my opening hand, I usually can beat Steel Song. When I don't, it's really tough. Those are definitely the games I'm not favored. I personally think Queen's Castle is by far the best card in this deck, and I'm going to try to play 4. I don't know why. Most lists don't. Actually, I've never seen a list with 4. Everybody, it's like very common to just play 3. Every game I get one of those and play, my opponent doesn't answer it on the spot immediately, I win the game hands down. So like I don't know why people don't play 4. I would definitely play 4 in this deck.
Yeah, I mean, Queen's Castle is a great card. I mean, a lot of people, I think, focus on. So I'm interested in your thoughts on this, Hal, on why it's so good, because I think a lot of people focus on the ability and they're like, oh man, that ability is bonkers. And it's good, but the 7 stat line with 2 lore is just very good. There's not many answers for it if it's not already set up on the board. Even Maui, can't one-shot it without a hook. So, it sits there, it at least gains you 2 lore, and it's going to take them a turn or 2 to remove while it's gaining lore. And if you can attach a creature to it to get some card draw, or character, I'm sorry, that's just bonus.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. The extra card draw is obviously good. The reason that card's just deceivingly super powerful is there's not another deck in the metagame that challenges other characters better than this deck. Because you've got, I guess Ruby Amethyst does it too, right? But you've got the like crab and stuff to buff your guys, and you've got all the bounce stuff. But forcing your opponent to have to like all in to try to take out the castle, and then you get to decide how you're going to challenge back into their characters to clean up the board, you're always going to be favored in those scenarios.
Yeah. John T in the chat pointing out this is his favorite deck, and it's been doing pretty well for him. So somebody else to get advice from if you're looking at running this. I just love that deck. 2 more decks I want to talk about. The next one, so Eric highlighted Zach Bivens Steel Amethyst Steel deck. This is not a list I would recommend, to be quite honest. I've tried it. It's good if you really, really know what you're doing and if you're taking people by surprise. It is aggro to the max, but like if you don't get a lot of reps in with this, it's a rough deck. But Amethyst Steel, I think, is a list. There are some viable lists out there that are very good. What do you all think about this color pairing?
I'll just comment on the Zach Bivens list real quick. I am a huge Zach Bivens fan, been following him since chapter 1. I've tried to play several of the lists that he has himself won events with, and I do not do very well. I think a lot of his lists are like he knows what the game plan is. He made it all make sense. and he's a great deck builder. And I actually love that because it's really hard for other people to be successful in his list.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
I think Amethyst Steel. I think it could be a decent choice for this weekend. I think you could play the Jafar Wheel version or the just Blue Fairy value version. I know actually Zan Saeed won a tournament with just a Steel Amethyst list this last weekend that wasn't Jafar Wheel or Blue Fairy. It was just purple steel like value, just stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
The one frustrating thing about this deck for me is sometimes I don't know which version it is sometimes until it's too late. I'm playing and I'm like, all right, what am I doing here? All right. Oh, it's a Jafar. There it goes.
Yeah. If you see a single steel Jafar, I'm going to put them on the Jafar version. But even then, sometimes they don't show that until it's too late.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of very similar to Steel Song, where it's like there are two very different ways to go with this color pair. And with Zach Bivens, like don't copy Bivens. He like we're all here. Zach Bivens is like up here in terms of like brain power. Like I might have created Steel Song. He mastered Steel Song.
Yep. I don't know. It is funny. I tried that list. I'm like, oh, let me see. I can figure out, Zach Bivens' list and nope. It was somebody, it might've been Scott Goodrich or Stephen Gettle, somebody. But they, when that list came out, or maybe it was Franz, I don't know. But on Twitter, like the first thing that they posted was, my first thought on this deck is don't play this deck if you're not Zach Bivens.
Yeah. Like I saw that deck going, is like, everyone's like, guys, it is possible to win a tournament with a 60 card deck. And I go, yeah, if you're Zach Bivens.
Yeah.
It's possible to win an NBA title if you're Michael Jordan.
Yep. Anyway. All right. There's one more deck I want to talk about, and it's not on Eric's list. So I'm actually sitting here like pulling it up because it didn't make that list. But it's one that I'm seeing a lot of now. And this deck was not on my radar till, I don't know, maybe like a week ago. And then I was like, oh, you run into it occasionally. You're like, oh, this is interesting. And then it runs over you. What are your thoughts on this?
I have never seen this deck in my life.
No?
I have never played it. I have never played against it. I simply know it exists.
All right, so this deck originated during Chapter 2. It had a really, really, really good matchup against Ruby Amethyst and lost to everything else. And I don't know that changed. I mean, the big breakout card in Sapphire Chapter 3 is Dime, and this is not a Dime deck. I would just have to ask, why are we playing this? I mean, unless if it's got a good, now I'll give it that. It's probably still got a good Ruby Amethyst matchup. Maybe it's got a good Ruby Sapphire matchup. I don't know, man. This is I would have to play some games and see. And even then, you're not playing Steel. You're not playing Be Prepared. I don't know, man.
Yeah, it is interesting. This is a fun one to talk about because you see decks that kind of like they start to like rise and they start to gain popularity and then like people figure them out and then they kind of drop, or they crack the code like Ruby Sapphire that we talked about, and then it just breaks into the meta. This one's kind of like there, I feel like. And I suspect it's one of those decks that that the people who play it right now are really, really good with it, and they play it really well. And it's an example of playing a B tier deck just super well, being good against the one previous dominant deck in the matchup, and so they win a lot of games because people run into it and they're like, I have no idea what to make of this deck. So I don't know. But once people see it and figure it out, perhaps it's not as good. I don't know.
Yeah, if we were looking at like a Sapphire Amethyst deck and it just had all cards in it that were not in any other decks, that were just like all original like tech and stuff, I'd be like, all right, there could be something here. But it's like there's nothing like spicy in this deck. It's just good Sapphire Amethyst cards.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. So I mean, I'm sure it's not bad. It can't be bad with like the bounce package and rabbit, and you got the you're going to draw a lot of cards. This deck is going to draw all the cards, but then can you deal with the board? Like, I mean, you don't really have any removal. So I mean, recurring Elsa looks cool. I don't know. There's also a lot of 2-ofs. Doesn't I mean I don't know.
Yeah, I mean this is a list that I pulled up. It's not necessarily like the list. But yeah, the recurring Elsas I think is what it does a lot in the end game, and then it uses that to lock down the board and then drops like 2 or 3 McDuck Manors at the same time. So it it tempos throughout the game, uses crabs and Fox kind of effectively. A little bit of item removal, draws a lot of cards, and then it gets to the end of the game and drops like 2 McDuck Manors and then locks you down with Elsa. Is what this version does. But I don't know. I wanted to mention it's kind of a weird one. Anyway, Stephen Gettle pointed out I'm violating my time again. I promise I will not run into This Week in Ink again. I got in trouble for that. I'm just kidding. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. Closing thought here. I did want to give you an opportunity before we closed off, Hal, to talk about prep for set championships. How are you prepping, and how would you advise people to get ready as they're looking at this thing going off in a couple weeks?
So how I basically prep for any event, I'm a metagamer, so I lose a lot of points for not sticking to the same deck and mastering it through and through. I change decks like every week. If you have fun doing that, go for it. Do it. I'm gonna do it. That's what I do. If you don't have that option, you don't have as much time as I do to play the game, definitely pick just a tier 1 deck, stick with it, learn it through and through. But my preparation, I look at deck list all day, every day. If you're not in the 20 Lore Pro Discord, definitely get in there. The good thing about that is it's all the different archetypes and deck lists, and then there's just thousands and thousands of comments and people talking about their matchups and all that. But I would say go look at some deck lists that you especially think you're going to see in your local meta. Whatever deck you're playing, know what your mulligan decisions are going to be, what your game plan is, what does it look like to win from your side of the board against any other deck. Don't leave any questions unanswered. If you do go, I'll reiterate again, you go find a deck list for the archetype you're looking for, and there's a couple cards in there you don't really know what the game plan is, or you don't know the best way to use it, like we talked about the Yzma. Take it out, put something else in there. Be like, I'd like a couple other things that interact with the board or interact with items, and then at least you know what that slot is for, and it's being utilized properly. So that's what I would say.
Yeah. And as a person that is in a less meta-focused region, as in we have 3 stores and a total of 12 people in our region, if you know your local meta, find a deck that kind of counters that. I know that Steel Song does not exist where I'm at. And so with that knowledge,
Lucky duck.
But having that kind of knowledge can help as well. Ultimately, like I've been saying, is if this is your first step into competitive, just soak in the experience, everyone's going in for that stitch. At least half the people that come in are going to be disappointed if they're going for the stitch. If you're going for the experience and you're going for the improvement, you will not be dissatisfied.
That's true. Can't say it more myself.
For sure. Play every round too. If you start out, 0 wins, 2 losses, don't just leave and be discouraged, especially if you're new to competitive. Play all the rounds. Go 06. Who cares? This is good tournament experience. Just have fun, be a good opponent,
Yeah. And it's in your local store. So it's not like you're flying to Chicago, Atlanta, Dallas for a who knows how much money those serialized cards are going to be. You are in your local store. You're home.
Yeah.
You're home. Yeah. The only difference is what the top prize is. That's the only difference, really.
Yeah, and there'll be another one. I imagine they're going to do this. I don't know.
Every set.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Yeah, if you don't do well this one, you can build upon it on the next one with Ursula's Return Championship, set 5 championships. You can just, if you're coming into this first championship and you get 2 wins, instead of striving for that big prize, go a step higher, win 3, win 4. Mm-hmm. This isn't a if you leave without a stitch, you're a terrible player and you should leave Lorcana altogether. No. That's not that is what some people's mindset is. I don't think that's the right mindset. The right mindset is, hey, this is the top tier of play. This is going to be the most competitive. Let's see how I do, and let's see how I can get better, and let's see if I can have fun at this level. If you don't have fun at this level, that's fine. Like, that's awesome. Like, that's why we have casual league nights. That's why there's multiplayer. That's why we're having a co-op product coming in. Like, if competitive is not the same for you, that does not make you any less of a player. That doesn't make you any less of a person. Same thing if casual is not your thing or whatever. Yeah, this is just you dipping your toe into a new form of Lorcana.
I agree. And at the end of the day, you're paying probably, an entry fee to go sit down for multiple hours and play, 15 games of Lorcana or 18 games of Lorcana. Hopefully, so you're getting to sit down and play a card game that you love, at a competitive level and learn and have a good time. So I couldn't agree with those sentiments anymore.
And remember, Cogsworth has Ward.
And remember, Cogsworth has Ward.
Fire!
And on that note, just a couple admin notes closing up. First of all, if you're joining us here this Monday for the first time, go ahead and hit subscribe. We put out videos all the time. We had a great video come out today with Hal talking about his Ruby Sapphire deck and how he plays it. It's fantastic. And go ahead and subscribe. If you're watching on Twitter, I know there's a lot of you out there. Go head over to YouTube, hit subscribe. It means a lot. On that note, I will say about our two creators here. They're both excellent creators. Mentioned Hal started creating content recently. Fantastic content on his channel, Lorcana. I'm amazed that wasn't taken already. So congrats on nailing that one down. Hal, what kind of videos are you doing on your channel?
So we're starting a versus series actually. If you're an old Magic player like myself, Star City Games should do a thing like that. But we recorded our first one. It should be out hopefully in the next couple of days. But it's actually I featured that new deck I was talking about. But it's just going to be me, one of our buddies. We sit down and play a top-down in-person game of Lorcana. Talk about mulligans, what our game plan is for both decks, and we just battle. We play some games. I plan on doing those hopefully once a week, once every other week, and then I'll do deck techs. It's mostly competitive strategy, but once this like Ursula Return stuff comes out, we're definitely gonna do this co-op stuff. So it's just gonna be a lot of in-person Lorcana content.
Yeah, and you're gonna invite me up to Dallas to play in some of your videos, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, anytime.
Let's do it. Speaking of which, you all up in Dallas, you stay up in Dallas for these set championships. There's a lot of good players up there.
I mean, we have so many. I don't think it's going to be a problem.
I don't need you and Bobby Brake and Remington and some of you others driving down here and taking our stitches. It's gonna be hard enough with Aaron Rubin running around. All right, and Knive. If you're not following Knive's Nerd Corner, go check it out. Knive, what are you doing over there?
Yeah, so as you can see, I just hit 500 subscribers today, which is exciting. I have been titled as the limited master of Lorcana. I do a lot of draft content. I do a ultimate draft guide with every single set. In between sets, I become the numbers guy. I go deep into the data behind Lorcana, working on a massive project that I'm excited to share once it's ready. That goes deep into the data. I have a series called Math of Lorcana, where a lot of questions that a lot of people have can get answered through a mathematical lens. I also start fires on Twitter. So if you like having fiery discussions, check me out on the site formerly known as Twitter.
All right. Before we sign off, last question. I don't want to leave this person hanging. Christopher Underwood asks how, if I only have one monstrous dragon, I've only got one, I can only afford one, I've got everything else, what would you sub in for the other dragons?
Oh, that's really tough. All right, I mean, it's not a good financial like switch, but if you have Hades, you can play Hades. It still kind of like plays the same role. Otherwise, you could just go up. Now, don't like go crazy on like the non-inkables, but you could try to max out on like the Madame Medusas and the Lady Tremaines. I would just try to find something else that comes into play and affects the board, especially like just something that banishes one of your opposing characters. But if you do that, I would probably try to swap out some other non-inkables so you don't just like go crazy. But luckily with like stuff like Fishbone Quill, your non-inkable count doesn't really matter as much. But yeah, something that comes into play and affects the board.
All right, there you go, Christopher. You heard it. And Hades can also sing "Be Prepared," so that's also good. All right. Hey, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks our guests for joining us. Until next week.